I'm excited to have Sol back. This is a treat. It's good to see. Like a couple weeks ago is cool.
I know, it's great to see you again. Thank you for having me.
And this one is an interesting podcast in the sense that Sol is part of this data enthusiast, data thought think tank, and we're doing something called as a team Machine Learning Day, ML Day, and one of the people I wanted to have on the show to talk about products that she's building, the amplification of the stories that she's been telling for so many years. Pick that thread up any day, any part, but in Machine Learning Day, we should talk about the process of even why data is important, what about data security, why data is the gold, how do you clean data, how do you move it through the pipeline? And no better guest. So Sol, pick this up wherever you want, but welcome to Machine Learning Day.
Thank you. It's a great topic to talk about because it showcases a lot of things. It showcases not just the work that we do as data scientists or ML engineers. Actually, I have noticed, and we do have some people on board in our company where they may not necessarily self-define as data scientists, but they do define themselves as machine learning engineers or machine learning AI engineer and research. So there seems to be a division, and the division goes a lot in the structural approach that you take when you start handling a project. But machine learning as a whole, and Machine Learning Day, one of the things that if I can influence
please,
is that it showcases what has happened during the pandemic, because COVID has been the digital transformation agent of our times. And the reason why that has been so notably felt by our community of scientists, data scientists at large, like general research groups, is because it has stress tested not just the human system, but also the infrastructure systems. We all moved remotely, right? We were all using all this cloud and native applications that we thought were native, but they really weren't that truly cloud native applications to be able to do our work. And more than before, the systems were really stressed. And that's one of the reasons why we took the time. We have been working on this for a bit, of course, but we actually really pushed forward into delivering Pititera as an option especially for our community. It is pretty much reinventing the cloud. So we scraped the cloud. The whole idea, the cloud was an amazing, evolution digitally for the space and for us to really take fourth industrial revolution acceptance, right? It's part of that fourth industrial revolution. The reality is that now that's old. The infrastructures are old. We take a lot of time doing our work, and also that has budgetary implications. Scientists are held back in innovation. They're held back in cross-validation. They're held back in doing their job well because they have budgetary restrictions. They cannot cross-validate their models and all the combinatorics that the hyperparameter tuning requires, because they have to fulfill a budget, right? A cloud budget. So there had to be a better way of doing this. And this is part of my experience that I had in Asia Pacific, working in Asia Pacific in a lot of different projects, including blockchain.
So I think you bring up an interesting point there. And I just want to, so when you think about machine learning and where Pititera fits, and I also want to know how you got the name, because names are so interesting. So, but where does that fit in that workflow? Is it at the business objective? Is it at the clean? Is it at the deployment? Where does this beautiful tool sit?
It fits everywhere in that pipeline, because you need to be able to have a high-speed cloud connectivity, right? That is consistent, that is resilient, that is also salient, and that is reliable. That even though that quickly can reroute you to the best high-speed location. At the same time, you need to be able to have data science environments that are properly designed, that actually use top of the line NVIDIA, GPU, the A100s as a standard. That at the same time, you have access to consulting groups, like in the case of DIL, that can help you batch data in. You don't need to batch the whole thing as a whole. And then you can get your results. You can actually then deploy them properly. So it's an end-to-end solution. It is high speed and in a private network environment, because that is part of the big issue. You want to have a private network, but it's not scalable. You want to have a private network, but you need elasticity. You want to do all these things, but you can't. Yep. So we had to build a high-speed supercompute cloud that could actually help us train a model instead of a month in 2 hours, which is already a huge deal. And for example, NLP is a classic example, right? I mean, the only work for NLP to work is for that thing to be trained as a monster. And that is just training. That is no cross-validation of hyperparameters. So you had to do all of this while at the same time, you needed to be able to have that elasticity in your group that the public cloud allows, but it's public, and then you have limitations, and then you have humongous bills also in the private cloud. I mean, we have experienced that at all areas in our work, teaching at Harvard, in our work with clients. So originally this was actually designed for DIL clients, but with COVID, we actually put out this disruptive private high cloud.
And listen, we're going to be talking about this a lot all through the day on Machine Learning Day. How do we download it? Or how do we contact your growth team? How do we get our hands on it?
You can go to pittatera.ai, and there you can connect to the product engineer team, and then we have a conversation. This is not something that we feel that it will be quickly accessible, online. We really want to get out of that commoditization. We need to learn to live in the cloud. It's different. It's an experience. And for us, it's our life. I mean, it's our workflow. It's everything we do. So you need to be able to view it differently. So we literally hold your hand, and we have a great team doing that. On the other hand, we are actually launching now, specifically for this ML issue. There is two sides of that coin. One is you're a working data scientist, or you're a working ML engineer, right? You're working. You need, of course, to have the right infrastructure. But before you got there, you had to learn it somewhere.
Yes.
And the reality is that all these higher education institutions don't have the right infrastructure either. I'm telling you, at Harvard, with all the resources there, already you can see that has been the problem from inception. And now we are going to be launching a specifically dedicated product for higher education. So you can you would be able to actually, just acquire the resources online directly. But because before you become who you are, you have to start somewhere, and then that needs to get married. And we are expanding it to boot camps. We're expanding it to community colleges. I want to have a connection with Bermuda College as well, because they do a lot of associate degrees. And it is about democratizing what we already have democratized in science, but making it in a way that is actually applicable. We need to be able to have infrastructure, digital technological infrastructure that allows us to really work with the workflows properly, to actually have ethical positions on it, to properly cross-validate so you don't get stuck in local minima. You can actually figure out a saddle point. You can actually get out of it, because all these models, they have the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? I mean, they tend to overfit. They tend to do a lot of things that are undesirable. You need to be able to make sure you're controlling for biases in your demographics, for biases in your data. You can work with all of that, but you need the resources to do it. And I feel, and I have seen empirically, Darren, that a lot of our community gets subpar results, not just because they may not have the leadership support or because they are not thinking the right questions, but they're not able to execute on the thought of these questions because there's budgetary constraints and there's just it doesn't happen.
There's a lot there, and I want to pick up a couple of threads. One, COVID impact. There are winners and losers, and it's an awful thing that happened with this global pandemic, but you're on the side of winning. Like you saw how the world was working, how the world was wired, and then it just changed, right? And now it was working one way, now everything's remote and everything is in the cloud.
Yeah.
And the product and how you're thinking about it is spot on. And sometimes the lucky break is something just outside of your hands. And this is just, the way the world is working now, it's just teed up perfectly for your product.
Yeah, I mean, and this is part of actually, being an innovator, having the leadership and vision. It requires also a team that believes in you, but it also requires for you not to be okay with the status quo, Darren. It requires for you to ask these overarching questions and not have reservations to, one, say, I don't know, to two, say, how can this be solved? And to three, and I think this is part of what is crucial, is to actually not even think outside the box, just throw the box away. Just throw it away because it confounds you. Then you start displaying all these cognitive biases, right? You shouldn't have any if you're really trying to get the car with the square wheels and make them round so the ride is not bumpy.
No, I get spot on. This is great. So one more time, give us the website so we can kind of put it on our feed.
Course. Yeah, pitaterra.ai.
And any history about the name?
Oh yeah, the name is actually it was funny because we were of course in supercompute you're talking about petaflops. You have the terabytes, but of course you can never name a product anything flop. So our chief revenue officer goes, how about Pitaterra? And then there was one of our scientists that was like, that is a great name because in that way we can actually have a lot of emotion and feelings about cohesion with the product. And part of our mission is to really take cloud computing to the space level, right? Because if you think about the cloud, right, here's Earth, here's the cloud, we should be over here. And one of the missions that I was telling the team is like, listen, at some point, let's think about 10 years. We need land to provide food source. It doesn't matter how many vertical farms you're going to have. Right. Land is a scarce resource. There's going to be a point in which data centers and data redundancy is going to go in outer space. We need to be able to have technology that actually works in high speed now. So we can actually accommodate those workloads that are going to happen later where location is not going to be terrestrial. And I know that you may think, and maybe people right now that are listening to me are going to be thinking, wow, she's really thinking far ahead. Honestly, I don't think it is that far-fetched. Look at everything that has happened in this century alone. I mean, and everything is not even duplicating.
I think you're right. I'm thinking about some of the satellites that Elon Musk is pushing up there. There is a race to space, and there's also, a government entity, Space Force. I mean, yeah, I think data up there, data or something there, there's a there, right? They can
It's going to be a reality in our lifetimes.
Yeah. No, I think that's exciting.
Way sooner than what we think. So when I was telling them, put a Terra to the moon, and that's how our logo came about. I was like, put a Terra to the moon. It's a rocket ship. Because of that, I mean, you really need to let's think about NLP. NLP from a machine learning and artificial intelligence perspective is pretty much the red-headed stepchild of artificial intelligence. There's not a lot, higher, education institutions, they have one NLP, specialist. The majority of the data that we transact and we exchange in our social culture, in our digital culture, that is social media, which actually I was having a conversation with one of my scientists before, it shouldn't even be called social media. Media is a unidirectional interaction. You're exposed to media, TV, magazines, you read news, but social media is a bidirectional interaction. It is not properly named. And we interact with it. It starts blurring the boundaries of what culture means. Because now all of a sudden you have geographically dispersed cultures that actually start redefining the ideas, and this impacts health of what we thought, our culture was.
Keep going. I was to let you finish. I wanted to add something to that. So keep going.
No, but NLP is a classic example of why it's so important for us to be thinking ahead in infrastructure, in for example, at this level of the cloud, like what we did with Terra, because the majority of data that we have is words. Data is and images, and sound. Data has gone beyond of what, we grew up studying that data was, right? A number, an ordinal thing.
Yeah. I think you bring up so many points that we talked about before the show. We're thinking about something ML Day, and this is a bigger journey, but I think maybe we have to get to a place where there's a data week, or there is so much here that we can pull younger generations to learn and come into this space, people in this space to think differently, as well as just maybe try new tools, because you are right. I mean, there's a lot of people thinking this way, and how do we get more conversations going? And there's a list of things that you just talked about, and it's not a 20-minute conversation. It's not a day. I think, Jesus, if we can get a week of people's attention on this, that will be interesting.
It deserves attention, Darren, and what you're doing is incredible. And I thank you so much, because it requires a group of people that think beyond data, right? Data now, if I can analyze it, it's data. It does not matter what it is.
Yep.
If it has an algorithm, or if it has a stable, systematic, and replicable procedure for analysis, it's data. Whatever feeds that input is data. And now data doesn't have to also conform with ideas of formats for different models. You can actually have diversity of data within one model. So you can even consider noise. I mean, the things that I do with noise today, literally injecting ML algorithms with noise so they can learn better, is 2 years ago I couldn't do.
Amazing.
So yeah, I mean, there is a lot to talk. Additionally, assembling, bringing models together to talk better. And I think that is part of the educational piece that falls through. People tend to think, unimodal in a way, right? You can actually do a lot with a lot of different models and assemble them. Your results are going to be so much better. You don't need to test one thing against the other. How about you put them all together?
I think you're giving me more ideas for Machine Learning Day, even some challenges like this. So
Great.
We will see you at the Machine Learning Day. We're going to be cheering for you. And it's always good hanging out with you. I always get smarter.
Oh, thank you so much. This is great. I love hanging out with you too. Yeah. Looking forward to it. Keep us involved. We will support.
Thank you. And we'll see you in a few days. We'll see you at the Machine Learning Day. And we're sponsored by Pandio, and Pandio is going to be launching their Pandio ML product on ML Day. So there will be a lot of going on at Machine Learning Day, and we're excited to always have Sol, and you're always welcome back as well. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Darren.